Hello, in this video, I'm going to give you a housing market update. So first of all, I'd like to wish you Happy New Year and welcome to 2021. We've had a crazy 2020, and I think 2021 is going to be a much better year for us as property investors. So in this video, I'm going to give you a housing market update. I'm going to talk about, will the property market crash in 2021? We're going to talk about stamp duty holiday and the effect that's going to have on the market, so you can understand what's going to happen in the UK property market over the next 12 months. My name is Simon Zutshi. I'm the founder of the Property Investors Network, and that means I've got 50 network meetings all over the country. And the reason I mention that is I've got my ear to the ground and I really know what's happening on a local basis all over the UK. So it's kind of a unique position. I'm also the author of Property Magic, which is the Amazon #1 property bestseller. And also I've been investing in property for 25 years. So I remember the last property crash very well, back in 2009, 2010. I was actively investing at that time and many of my students were as well. So if the property market does come down, which is what many experienced property investors expect, I know exactly what you need to do. So hopefully this video is going to give you some real insights and information on some of the things you should be doing right now and what we think is going to happen to the property market. Now, there are several factors that are going to affect the property market. And I think we need to look back and see what's happened in 2020 to understand what might happen in 2021. So leading up to 2020, for the last 10 years, from 2010, we've had 10 years of steady growth. Most properties around the country have doubled in value. If we go back to 2005, we saw a really big boom, particularly in cheaper areas up north and in Northern Ireland. And those areas boomed massively, fueled by the introduction of buy-to-let mortgages. And people probably paid more than they should for property. So when the crash came, those areas crashed the most, and they haven't really recovered as much of the rest of the country has. Most of the country, if you look at buying a property in 2010, in most places that property has certainly gone up in value. In many places it's doubled over the last 10 years. Now, into 2020, when prices were quite high already, we got hit by the coronavirus pandemic. The UK pretty much shut down when the lockdown happened in March 2020. And for about 10 or 12 weeks, nothing happened in the UK property market. Now that was during a time that's normally a boom, which is springtime. There's normally a boom in the property market, which didn't happen. So when suddenly the market opened up, I think there was a real feeling of relief and everyone seemed to go mad. We were coming into the summer. There's normally a summer boom as well. So there was a huge amount of pent-up demand in the UK property market from about July 2020. And also there were lots of transactions which had literally halted for the best part of 3 months. I had 1 purchase and 3 remortgages going through and nothing happened for them. So all that activity suddenly caught up. This means that mortgage brokers, solicitors and estate agents were all very, very busy. And then the market seems to go crazy. There was lots of money floating around from bounce back loans and CBIL loans, which probably shouldn't have been used for property, but I guarantee a lot of it probably was used for deposits. And I think there were also people who had money in the bank who felt, look, this pandemic, this recession's pretty bad. They remember what happened in the last recession and they thought maybe money isn't best left in the bank. Maybe I should put it into assets like real estate. So people bought property, people were buying cash, people were buying things at the end of 2020 for way more than they were worth. I live in a flat. The people below me decided to sell their property. They put it on the market. It went within 2 days. It went for more than they were asking. And that was a real symptom that we saw happening in the property market towards the end of 2020. Now, I want you to understand this. Whenever property prices boom, you always have a bust afterwards. And actually, if you go back and watch some of the housing updates I've done towards the end of 2020, I was saying, look, the property market cannot sustain this growth. At some point, it's going to have to crash. It's going to have to come down. And I was really surprised to see that didn't happen. Now, what was going to cause that crash, I believed, was at the end of October, when the government's furlough scheme was coming to an end. There were millions and millions of people on furlough who I expected unfortunately may not be brought back to work. They'd probably be made unemployed. That would have had a catastrophic effect on the economy and the sentiment of the country, and that's why the government have extended the furlough into 2021, initially to March, now to April. So this has, I think, prolonged the inevitable. I think at some point we're going to see people lose their jobs. The recession's going to get worse. That's going to have a knock-on effect on commercial property. It's going to have a knock-on effect on people who cannot afford to hold their homes anymore and have to then sell them. There's going to be more supply in the market than there is demand, and we're going to see property prices come down. Last year, in about May, June time, the Bank of England was saying they felt that property prices in the UK would be affected by about 16%, a 16% downturn because of the effect of COVID-19 and the recession. Now that didn't happen, and I think that's why the government intervened and they've extended furlough. They also brought in the stamp duty holiday. So let me talk a little bit about that, because that's really important when looking at what's going to happen to property prices in 2021. So the government announced that they were going to give everyone a stamp duty holiday. Now, stamp duty is the tax you pay when you buy a property. The amount you pay varies. It's based on the value of the property. And as investors, we pay an extra 3%. So they said anyone who's buying a first home, or if you're selling a home to buy another property, on purchases up to £500,000, there was no stamp duty. Now, as investors, we still pay the extra 3%, but it's still less than we would pay normally. This did the trick that the government wanted. It really stimulated the market. And there was a rush for a lot of people to come and buy properties because they wouldn't have to pay stamp duty. Now, this was supposed to be until the end of March 2021. Now, anytime there's a change like this, when the government first suggested that they were going to bring a few years ago, they said, right, anyone who's an investor is going to have to pay an extra 3% stamp duty. They gave everyone notice. There was a real flood of purchases that went through, and everyone was rushing to get it done before the cut-off point so they didn't have to pay the extra 3% stamp duty. So that caused a real boom to the market. And a similar thing has happened now. So the government wanted to protect the UK property market because the UK economy is based mainly on retail, but also the property sector. And they knew if the property sector was hit as well as the retail, which had been hit by the pandemic, then the country was really going to be in difficulty. And that's why they introduced this stamp duty holiday to stimulate the market, to make sure that they propped it up so the market kept on going. And it certainly did the trick. But the question is, what's going to happen at the end of March 2021, where the stamp duty holiday is supposed to end? Now, there's a couple of things. It might just end, or the government might realise that maybe they need to extend this further in the same way they extended furlough, just to keep the property market propped up. Now, no one knows what they're going to do. I'm sure there's going to be an announcement about it at some point, but until that happens, we don't quite know. When that is announced, I'm definitely going to do another video all about that and explain my thoughts. But here's my thinking at the moment based on what we know right now. So if you want to buy a property in the UK at the moment, when you find a property today, it's probably going to take at least 2, if not 3 months for that sale to go through, for a couple of reasons. First of all, as I said, everyone is very, very busy. Solicitors are busy, mortgage brokers are busy. It's taking a long time for lenders to process mortgage applications. And I think they're a little bit nervous about the market as well. So they're not rushing out to lend lots of money. They do want to lend money, but they're being very cautious about it. So even if you found a property in January, it's very unlikely that that transaction is going to go through before the end of March. You know, unless you're buying cash, when maybe you could do it. But if you're getting a mortgage, which most people do, and you're starting to find a property right now, it looks like you're probably going to have to pay the normal stamp duty unless the stamp duty holiday is extended. So what does that actually mean for you, and what does it mean for the property market? Well, if you think about it, the idea of not paying stamp duty encourages people to come and buy their property. But if they realise, well, actually, that's not going to happen now, I haven't got enough time, suddenly that demand falls away. So I expect that we're going to see property prices certainly start to slow and maybe even drop over the next few months. When it comes to April, there's no incentive at all. I mean, obviously anyone who's already found a property and they're going through the transaction, they will hopefully get those done before the end of March. When it comes to April, that incentive is no longer here. Unless the government do decide to extend it, which they might decide to do, I think sales are going to drop off a cliff in April. Now, add to this the fact that we're in this third national lockdown in England at the moment. No one knows how long this is going to last. Now, like the second lockdown, the property market is still open. There are restrictions, but you can still go and look at properties. You can still tenant properties, these kind of things, as long as you're observing social distancing and being very careful. Now, things are changing on a daily basis. So as I film this video right now, that is the case. That might well change. But it's a bit like the second lockdown we had. The first lockdown, everything shut. And because of this new, more virulent version of the COVID-19 virus, there's a chance that there might be tighter and tighter restrictions, and so it might be difficult to actually go and view property. Now, having said that, I've actually purchased property in the past that I've never actually been to, and I've never personally seen the property. I've never even met the owner. I have had someone else in the local area go and look at the property for me, take some pictures, do what they need to do, and then I've done the deal over the phone. So I absolutely know it is possible to buy property remotely as long as you have someone else who can go and look around the property for you. What's become a real boom in the UK property market industry is these virtual tours. So there are lots of companies now who will now do virtual tours of property. They have these 360-degree cameras that can take really good images, and you can actually walk through a property. It's very clever technology, and what this means is you can actually view a property without physically attending. Now, if you were going to buy a property, I think it's always sensible that you or someone you know actually does view the property and check everything is as expected, but you could certainly do a lot of research and prep work online before you even have to step inside the property. So that's going to help the property market. But it really depends on what happens to this lockdown. My gut feeling is that the government will probably not extend the stamp duty holiday. My gut feeling is this lockdown is going to get worse. And as that happens, I think we're going to see less and less demand for property. And if you think about macroeconomics, you've got less demand, you've still got lots of supply. Well, I think prices are going to come down. So what's going to stimulate the supply? Well, as I've mentioned in these videos previously, at the end of January is the time where everyone does their self-assessment tax return. Anyone who is a landlord, they should be submitting their tax return for the previous tax year. So what that means, at the end of January, people put their tax return in, and that's the point where they pay their tax as well. Now, this January 2021, is the third year where we're seeing the effect of the introduction of Section 24. Section 24 were the tax changes that were introduced back in April 2017. And basically, it's a change to the way that we, as property investors, are taxed. What this means is that if you own property in your own name, which was the way that most people did it, it was the most tax efficient way, and if you are a higher rate payer, which many landlords are because they have a job and they have income from property, and if you have mortgages, which again most investors have, it means you're going to pay more tax. So let me say that again. If you own property in your own name and you're a higher rate taxpayer with mortgages, you're going to pay a lot more tax on your property income. And this January 21, is where we're seeing the third year of that in effect. Now, the government have decided to phase this in over 4 years. The first year we saw 25%, that was in 2019. In 2020 January, we saw 50% of this tax change. In January 2021, we're going to see 75%. And when we get to next January 2022, we're going to see the full 100% effect of Section 24. So let's say you've got a landlord who might be earning, I don't know, £100,000 after tax from all of their property. They've got a good portfolio. Their job is managing that portfolio full time. That's what they do for a living. Because of Section 24, if they're a higher rate taxpayer and they own the properties in their own name and they've got mortgages, that £100,000 profit after tax might come down to maybe something like £65,000 or £70,000 after tax. And that's still a pretty good income, right? But they're having a massive reduction in the amount of money that they were making. Now, there is a solution. Many people have moved their properties into a company, but it's expensive. You have to get good legal advice and accounting advice to do that. You have to change your mortgages. So there are an increasingly large number of landlords who are saying, you know what? I don't think I want to be in this game anymore. I've been doing it 10, 15, 20 years. I'm going to sell my properties. I've had some really good capital growth, and now I'm going to sell up and I'm just going to retire. So we're seeing lots and lots of landlords doing that. Certainly in 2019, when we first saw the effect of Section 24, we had more long-term landlords come to the property investor network meetings looking to get rid of some of their properties. We saw it at the beginning of 2020, and for most of 2020, we've been online to have virtual PIN meetings. And at those, again, we've seen experienced landlords come along looking to sell and get rid of their properties. So this is still a huge opportunity for you. If you can reach out to and find other landlords, and that might be through direct marketing, so letters to registered HMO landlords, or responding to landlords' adverts online and newspapers saying, yep, I'm interested in renting or buying your property, we can potentially find properties that are not on the market now, but the landlord might be very open to potentially selling their property. Now, landlords also have a little bit of a challenge. If they sell all their properties in one go, they're going to pay a huge amount of capital gains tax. Capital gains tax is the tax that we pay when we sell a property that's not our own home. It's the tax on the profit between what we bought it for and what we sold it for, less any capital costs. So if we've spent money improving the kitchen or putting a new roof on, and the costs of buying and selling, they're also included. But once you take those off, we pay tax on what's left over. Now, each year, you get a personal capital gains tax allowance. The Chancellor has mentioned that he wants to change and look at potentially changing capital gains tax. So again, we're going to have to see what happens. I'm going to do a budget special video when we look at all the impact on property investors once those are actually announced, but we don't know what's going to happen just yet. But at the moment, there's an allowance of £12,300 where you can sell a property or shares or anything where there's a capital gain, and the first £12,300 each year is tax-free. Now, if you own that asset in joint names with a partner, you both get that £12,300 allowance. So in other words, you can sell a property and the first £24,600 is completely tax-free. Now, if you're a higher rate taxpayer, getting £24,600 tax-free is actually a really good thing for you. But you only get the allowance once a year. It's not per property, it's per year. And if you don't lose the allowance, you use it. So any landlord who's got a number of properties deciding they want to retire, they're going to sell one property a year, and phasing the sales over a number of years is a great way to do it, because then they can use their personal capital gains tax allowance each year. So many landlords who are looking to retire are going to be putting their properties on the market, but we can actually help them. And in fact, I've got some online training all about what I believe is going to be one of the best strategies for 2021, which is purchase options and purchase lease options. If you look below this video in the description, there's going to be a link, and I'd encourage you to come and register for that training with me so you can learn all about how you can use this strategy to help these landlords who are looking to sell. I was originally talking about an increase in property coming onto the market. I think it's going to be some of these landlords looking to sell that's going to have an increased supply in the market. Not so many buyers because people are nervous about the market coming down. Also, it might become difficult to actually fund purchases. When the market comes down in the last property market crash, what we saw was lenders become very nervous. They dropped the loan to value. And in fact, some lenders stopped lending completely because they were just too exposed to the property market. So if we see property prices come down in 2021, I don't think it's going to be as bad as we saw in 2009. But if prices do come down, lenders who remember that time might get very nervous. And so it might get harder again for people to buy property. So even if there is demand, people want to buy property, it might be very difficult for them to actually do it, and so less property is sold. This again will bring property prices down further. Now, the question I'm always asked is, Simon, how much do you think property prices will fall in 2021? I wish I knew the answer, but I don't know. In fact, nobody knows. It's a bit of a guess, really. The Bank of England did predict last year that property prices would come down 16%, but that was before all the government intervention that I've mentioned already. And so I think maybe more like a 10% drop in property prices is probably realistic. I know some people think it might be as much as 50%. Some people think the property market will not crash in 2021. I doubt that's going to be the case. I think this boom that we saw at the end of 2020, it cannot continue. After every boom, there is always a bust. Prices are too high. They have to correct down, and I believe it's going to happen in 2021. The other question is, when's it going to happen? Well, I just don't know. Again, if I could, I'd get my crystal ball out and I'd tell you, but I don't know. Nobody knows. I think it's going to partly depend on what happens with this stamp duty holiday. Are the government going to extend it beyond the end of March 2021, in which case it might prolong the market fall? Or will they finish that, and then with that incentive disappearing, with potentially loads of people coming off furlough in April 2021, I think we're going to see by the summer, I think we're definitely going to see prices come down. They're certainly going to stall, level out, but I think by then we'll see them coming down as well. But who knows? We're just going to have to wait and see to see what happens. So I'd love to get your view. Down below, why not come and make a comment? What do you think is going to happen in the market? No one knows. It's just an opinion. No one's right, no one's wrong. It's just your personal opinion. I'd love to hear what you think. If you've got value from this video, it would also be great if you can like the video, and also make sure you hit the bell icon and also subscribe to the channel. By subscribing to the channel, I bring out new videos every single week about the market, about certain strategies, about questions that I'm asked. I want to answer your questions for you. So subscribe and make sure you don't miss any of this valuable free information I'm putting out through this YouTube channel. And I say, please do comment below. What do you think about the video? You might disagree, that's absolutely fine. Let's hear your opinion. If you agree, that's fine. If you like it, I say, please like it, and tell other people about this channel as well. Now, I've actually got another video lined up for you that you might want to watch after this training that I think is also relevant to you. And remember, we've got that online training with me all about purchase options and purchase lease options. So please click on the link below to come and join that training with me. I think you're going to find it really powerful, and it's going to show you how you can make the most out of the 2021 market, whether you're completely new or whether you're a really experienced investor. By the way, if you're an experienced investor, you can also use purchase lease options to sell property that you don't want. You can get rid of it to what we call tenant buyers. And I'm going to be doing some more videos about tenant buyers. It's a very misunderstood strategy, and I think it's something that you should know about, and it can be a great strategy that you can use. So look out for that video as well. In the meantime, I'd like to encourage you, as always, to invest with knowledge, invest with skill. Click on the link below and come and join me on this training. If you enjoyed this video, you should definitely check out this next video that I've lined up for you. And also click on the link below to come and join me for some live online training all about how you can use purchase lease options and purchase options in your property investing. Because it's live training, you can actually ask me any questions you've got about these incredibly powerful investing tools. So click on the link, book the training right now.